IATF na nagpapatuloy hanggang ngayon. Sinabi po ni DOTR Secretary Tugade na samantalang isususpindi po yung implementasyon ng 0.75 na distancing sa pampublikong mga transportasyon at ibabalik po ito sa 1 meter. Ulitin ko po, kaka-anunsyo lang po ni Secretary Tugade sa nagaganap na IATF meeting na balik 1 meter distancing muna po tayo sa pampublikong transportasyon habang wala pa pong desisyon ang Presidente kung ito nga po ay po pwedeng maibaba sa 0.75. Kaugnay rito, maalala niyo po na sinabi ko na baka today po ang desisyon ni Presidente. Baka hindi po mangyari yan dahil ang report po na pag-aaralan ni Presidente ay isusumiti pa lamang ngayong araw po. At inaasahan natin na siguro po magkakaroon ng desisyon ng Presidente sa Lunes sa kanyang susunod na talumpati sa taong bayan. So suspendido po ang 0.75, balik 1 meter, haba pong wala pang desisyon ang ating Presidente sa bagay na ito. Now, nagpulong po kagabi naman ang mga leaders ng ating Kongreso, kasama po ang ating Presidente at kasama rin po si Senator Bongo, Chairman ng Committee on Health. Ang napag-usapan po kahapon ng ating Presidente, ni Senate President Soto, ni Senator Bongo, ni Speaker Alan Cayetano at Majority Floor Leader Majority Romualdez ay tungkol po sa pagbubukas ng ekonomiya, ang concern ng mga namumunuhunan at negosyante na lubhang naapektuhan ng pandemya ay paano masugpo ang red tape at korupsyon at mapaikli ang mga proseso sa government transactions. Hiningi po ng Presidente sa mga congressional leaders na magpasa pa ng mga karagdagang lehislasyon o mga pulisiya para mapabilis po ang proseso ng matulungan ang mga negosyante sa panahon ng pandemya. Dahil wika nga ng Presidente, takot na nga sila sa panahon ng pandemya, mabagal pa ang mga proseso sa panig ng gobyerno. Nangako naman po ang mga leaders ng ating Kongreso na pag-aaralan ito at bibigyan po ng katugunan ang kahilingan ng ating Presidente. Balitang IATF naman po, maalala nyo po na nung huling meeting ng IATF na apruban po ang Resolution number 71. Ito po ay ang lifting ng pansamantalang suspensyon ng inbound travel ng returning residents ng Region 6. Ito ang Iloilo City at mga probinsya ng Guimaras, Iloilo, Negros Occidental at Antique. Anong ibig sabihin po nito? Ang mga locally stranded individuals ay pwede nang umuwi sa kanilang mga lugar na nabanggit. Siguraduhin lamang na malusog ang katawan at kasama ang pagka-quarantine ng 14 na araw sa mga probinsya sa minimum public health standards. Napagkasunduan din po na anumang request para sa imposition, extension at lifting ng moratorium ng lokal na pamahalaan ay kinakailangang desisyonan na ng Regional Interagency Task Force at ipapatupad ng National Task Force. Ito po ang process flow na susundin. Pumunta naman tayo sa Bayanihan 2 at ito na po yung pangatlong installment sa aming pagsa-summarize po ng Bayanihan Tulo. No? Sa nakaraang dalawang press briefing, pinag-usapan na natin po ang COVID-19 responses at intervention ng nasabing batas para sa ating mga health workers at iba pang sektor na naapektuhan ng pandemya. Mga tulong para muling pasiglain ang ekonomiya at ilan sa mga special powers ng Presidente. Sa huling bahagi ng diskusyon po natin ukol sa RA 11494, pag-usapan naman po natin ang ilan sa mga probisyon na walang direktang may kinalaman sa coronavirus. Ito ang ilan sa mga mahalagang punto. Mauurong ang deadlines at timelines ng pagfa-file at pagsusumite ng mga dokumento, pagbabayad ng buwis at iba pang para mabawasan ang bigat na dinadala na under community quarantine. Lahat ng mga bangko, financing and lending companies, real estate developers, insurance and pre-need companies, financial institutions kasama ang GSIS, SSS at Pag-ibig ay inatasan magbigay ng one-time 60 days grace period para sa pagbabayad ng loans na pumapatak ang due on or before December 31, 2020. Kasama na rito ang personal, housing, commercial at motor vehicle loans, amortization, financial lease payments, and premium payments sa credit card payments. Lahat ng loans ay maaaring masettle on a staggered basis without interest hanggang December 31, 2020 or sa napagkasunduan na dalawang partido. Ganun din sa mga institusyon na magbibigay ng ilaw, tubig at telekomunikasyon at iba pang utilities. May 30 araw na grace period na ibibigay ang mga utilities na ito sa panahon ng ECQ at MECQ na walang pinapataw na interest o penalty. Pagkaraan ng grace period, ang unpaid bills ay maaaring masettle on a staggered basis payable in no less than 3 monthly installments. Binibigyan naman ang 30-day grace period ang residential rents at community rents or lessees na hindi pinayagang magtrabaho at MSMEs at mga kooperatiba na pangsamantalang itinigil ang operasyon kung ang kanilang due ay papatak sa panahon ng community quarantine na walang interest, penalties, fees, or other charges. Lahat ng due sa panahon ng community quarantine ay kailangang ma-amortize in equal monthly installments hanggang December 31, 2020. Samantala, patuloy ang pagbibigay ng libre at masustansyang pagkain sa mga bata alinsunod sa RA 11037 or ang masustansyang pagkain para sa Batang Pilipino Act regardless kung anong modality of learning. Ang retirement benefits na natanggap ng mga opisyal ng mga empleyado na nasa private firms mula June 5, 2020 hanggang December 31, 2020 ay hindi makakasama sa gross income at exempted sa income taxation. COVID-19 updates naman po tayo. Ito po ang global updates ayon sa Johns Hopkins University. Mahigit 29 na milyon or 29,743,406 kaso na po ng COVID-19 sa buong mundo. Mayroong mahigit sa 900,000 naman or 938,820 ang binawian ng buhay dahil dito. Nangunguna pa rin po ang Estados Unidos, pangalawa ang India, Brazil, Russia at Peru. Ang Estados Unidos po ngayon mayroong 6,627,278 na cases and 196,691 deaths. Ang India, 5,020,359 cases, 82,066 deaths. Ang Brazil, 4,419,083 cases, 134,108 deaths. Ang Russia po ay 1,075,485 cases, 18,853 deaths. At ang Peru po ay 738,020, 30,927 deaths. Sa Pilipinas po, meron po tayong 272,934 cases. Ang deaths na po natin ay nasa 4,732. Ang ating case fatality rate po ay nasa 1.7%. Samantala, meron na po tayong 3,008,239 na individuals na na-testing sa pamamagitan po ng PCR tests. No? At ito po ay ginawa sa 97 licensed RT-PCR laboratories at sa 29 licensed gene expert laboratories. Sa mga taong na-test na po, 60,344 ang active cases. At dito po sa mga active cases, ang asymptomatic ay 8.4%, ang mild ay 87.7%, ang severe ay 1.2%, ang critical ay 2.7%. Mataas po ang ating recoveries, 207,858. Ang deaths nga po ay 4,732. Pagdating naman po sa critical care capacity, meron pa po tayong 50% available sa ICU beds. Meron pa po tayong 55% available sa isolation beds, 83% available sa ward beds, 53% available sa ward beds, I stand corrected, at 73% available sa ventilators. So, nasa medium risk lang po tayo pagdating sa critical care capacity. Sa mga ibang bagay naman po, the The Duterte administration is ready to work with Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga in further strengthening the strategic bilateral cooperation, building on the special relationship established with former Prime Minister Abe Shinzo. The Philippines considers Japan as a close friend, a friend closer than a brother. We are committed to do everything to make these ties move from strength to greater strength. Congratulations po sa bagong Prime Minister po ng Japan. Isa pong point of clarification bago ko ipakilala ang ating mga paunahin, ito ay tungkol po sa travel sa Tagaytay sa Cavite dahil dinagsa po ang Tagaytay ng mga bakasyonista galing po sa iba't ibang lugar kasama na po ang Metro Manila. Kasama po natin ngayon si General Guillermo Eleazar ng Task Force COVID Shield. Sir, joining us by Zoom. General Eleazar, are you in the house?
Yes, magandang hapon sa iyo, Secretary Harry.
Maraming salamat po at pinaunlakan nyo kami. Alam ko meron kayong 12:30 affairs. So ano po yung anunsyo natin pagdating po doon sa pagbabiyahe sa Cavite, lalong-lalo na sa Tagaytay? Go ahead,
Pinaklaro lang po natin na base po doon sa prevailing protocol na ibinigay ng National Task Force, the remaining travel restriction that we have is that pag magkocross tayo ng mga boundary ng mga probinsya, unless ikaw ay apor at work-related lakad mo, ay dapat ay may travel authority. Pero kung tayo po ay nasa NGCQ na, binibigyan na po, pinaubayan na sa local government unit kung hahayaan nyo po na bukas na rin kayo dun sa karatig lugar nyo. Provided na ikaw ay NGCQ at yung katabi mo o panggagalingan nitong mga magta-travel ay nasa NGCQ pa rin. So alam nyo po, itong travel authority, yun po yung naging basihan ng ating mga LGUs para may control tayo pagpasok nila. Dahil pag nag-a-apply po tayo ng travel authority, hindi lamang ang kailangan ay medical clearance certificate, kung hindi, yung coordination na napakahalaga from the sending LGU to the receiving LGU. Na pag yan po ay pinagbigay alam sa kanila, they have the control whether they will allow them outright or pwedeng ma-delay yung pagpasok doon. Subalit, kagaya nga po sa sitwasyon natin dito po sa Cavite, dahil po siya ay MGCQ na, pwede niya na pong ibukas ang kanyang border sa iba as long as ang katabi niya dapat ay nasa NGCQ pa rin. Meaning, in the case po ng Cavite, na sinasabi nga natin na within the province, hindi naman po kailangan ng travel authority. Pero dahil ang katabi niya ay Metro Manila at saka pati po yung Batangas at nasa GCQ pa rin yun, ay kailangan pa rin po ng travel authority kung dadaan sila or magagaling sa Metro Manila or doon po sa Batangas. Ngayon, kung galing man po na Laguna, since pareho silang NGCQ, pwede na po wala na pong travel authority at yan po ay desisyon ng local government executive. Subalit para po sa ibang mga probinsya, kung na nasa MGCQ, kung gusto nyo pa rin po na kayo ay may travel authority ang mga papasok sa inyo, which I believe ay yun po yung pinapractice dahil naandun ang control natin. Dahil kung tatanggalin natin ang travel authority, talaga pong you can expect that napakarami na pupunta sa inyong mga border at papasok sa inyo. So malinaw po yung sinasabi natin ngayon na in the case of Cavite dahil nga sa Tagaytay, pwede pong pumasok doon dahil MGCQ, pero kung ang panggagalingan ay Metro Manila, boundary ng Metro Manila in Batangas, kailangan pa rin ng travel authority dahil nasa GCQ ang Metro Manila.
Okay. Nawala ang audio. General, nawala ang audio, but thank you very much. To summarize, MGCQ to MGCQ travel, hindi kinakailangan ng travel pass, but the local government unit may still impose it. GCQ to MGCQ, kinakailangan ng travel pass. Mga taga Metro Manila na nais pumunta ng Tagaytay, kinakailangan nyo pong kumuha ng travel pass. At bago kayo mabigyan ng travel pass ng PNP, kinakailangan magpresenta po kayo ng medical certificate. Okay, dito po nagtatapos ang ating presentasyon ngayong tanghali. Bago po tayo pumunta sa mga tanong ng MPC, meron po tayong dalawang panauhin ngayon. Ang una po ay walang iba kundi the man of the hour, Justice Secretary Menardo Guevara, na nanguna po sa PhilHealth Task Force. At kasama rin po natin si Dr. Manuel Dairit. Siya po ay dating kalihim ng Department of Health at ngayon po ay dating Dean ng Ateneo School of Medicine and Public Health via Zoom. Unahin po muna natin si Secretary Maynard. Sir, Thank you very much for joining us. This is your one of the rare public appearances that you've had so far to discuss your report on Task Force PhilHealth. The floor is yours, Secretary Guevara.
Magandang tanghali, Sec. Harry. I was asked kung meron akong presentation na gagawin bago mag-Q&A, bago magtanong ang ating mga media and reporters who are present here. But sabi ko sa kanila, hindi na ako gumawa ng any PowerPoint presentation. Ang intention ko na lang ay basahin yung highlights noong memorandum for the President na sinabmit ko. Ito yung binasa niya nung nakaraang Monday night, if I'm not mistaken. Kaya lang nahihirapan siya na nabasahin yon dahil sa wala siyang reading glasses yata na dala at the time. And this was supposed to be a confidential memorandum, but because he already publicly read it, then I guess hindi na siya confidential. Kaya I can probably quote or repeat yung mga parts na binasa niya na hindi masyadong malinaw sa taong bayan. At maybe ito na magiging basis later on ng mga questions coming from the media. So, Secretary, if you don't mind, I'll just go through some parts of this confidential memo for the President so that this could form the basis of questions later on. Will that be okay?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead. Thank you very much.
All right. So let me just go very briefly to the salient parts of our confidential memo for the President. Summary of findings. From a general perspective, we find that persons who are supposed to set the policies and operational guidelines for the management of the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation, namely the Board of Directors and the Executive Committee, have not shown the due diligence required of them in the discharge of their duties, particularly in the disbursement of the National Health Insurance Fund. Their lack of diligence in due care has been highlighted in, among others, the following. Letter A, their approval and implementation of the Interim Reimbursement Mechanism, or IRM, without sufficient standards. Letter B, their approval of PhilHealth's Information and Communications Technology, or ICT, budget upon a mere representation by the SVP in charge that the whole management information system of PhilHealth would collapse unless said budget was approved. And letter C, their adoption of corporate policies and practices that fail to check, investigate, prosecute, and penalize the wrongdoing of PhilHealth personnel, as well as healthcare institutions and professionals. On the IRM, the Executive Committee showed lack of due care, if not outright negligence, in approving and implementing the IRM as manifested by the following. Letter A, IRM fund releases were rushed even when the circular implementing the scheme was not yet effective. On 31 March 2020, the Executive Committee presented for the Board's approval the allocation of 27 billion pesos as IRM funds for the COVID-19 pandemic and asked the Board to ratify IRM releases already made, despite the fact that the circular had not yet been deposited with the Office of the National Administrative Register, or ONAR, as required by law. The Board approved both requests. Letter B, the IRM was implemented without sufficient standards and guidelines, making fund releases susceptible to abuse. In converting the IRM into a special privilege, the circular removed the need for prior Board approval for IRM fund releases whenever a fortuitous event occurs, and for the issuance of new guidelines for its implementation. It likewise removed a number of requirements previously imposed upon HCIs, such as the survey and post-survey requirements, and centralized the evaluation of IRM fund beneficiaries at the Office of the PCEO. Letter C, IRM fund releases were made despite the absence of mechanisms to monitor fund utilization and liquidation, and without taxes due thereon being withheld. On the ICT procurement, members of the Executive Committee led by President and Chief Executive Officer Ricardo Morales and SVP Jovita Aragona, Chief Information Officer and Head of the Information Management Sector, submitted to the board a request for budget allocation for the procurement of ICT resource items for fiscal year 2020 worth 734 million pesos, more or less. The ICT items were neither included in PhilHealth's Information System Strategic Plan, or ISSP, nor approved by the Department of Information and Communications Technology as required by law. Letter B, an internal audit report that detailed major discrepancies or inconsistencies in the inventory of PhilHealth's hardware and software was not presented to the board upon the instance of PCEO Morales. Letter C, a proposal to procure network switches for the PhilHealth Regional Office at the National Capital Region was recommended to and approved by the board, notwithstanding a Commission on Audit query memorandum on the non-utilization of 24 similar switches. Next, the PhilHealth management adopted questionable policies and weak enforcement practices that failed to check, investigate, prosecute, and penalize wrongdoing. The PhilHealth management has adopted a policy towards entitled settlement of claims without accountability, and even the grant of wholesale amnesty in favor of HCIs with claims that appear to be no longer enforceable against a corporation. Based on the investigation of the Senate, less than 2/3 of the 7,452 pending cases against HCIs, these are the hospitals and professionals, from 2010 to 2019 had been acted upon by the corporation, less than 2/3. Meanwhile, only a little over 1/3 of the 1,968 cases of fraudulent claims from the year 2000 to 2019 had been decided. Finally, in his testimony before the task force, SVP Rodolfo Del Rosario of the legal sector admitted that thousands of cases involving HCIs and PhilHealth employees have remained unfiled. So, in our conclusion, we said the following. The negligence exhibited by certain officers of the PhilHealth Executive Committee gives rise to both administrative and criminal liability under the following laws. RA number 1319, or the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act, the Revised Penal Code for malversation of public funds or property, and illegal use of public funds or property, and administratively, gross misconduct and gross neglect of duty under civil service laws. In addition, the same corporate officers may be held liable for violation of the National Internal Revenue Code in connection with their failure to withhold taxes on IRM releases. Next, the board chairman and members exhibit negligence in services to wit, their careless approval of ICT procurement, the ratification of IRM fund releases in March 2020, and consent to modification of judgments in court-adjudicated cases. Such negligence is somehow mitigated by the active concealment of vital documents and information and the apparent misrepresentation by those who had sought the board's approval. The foregoing notwithstanding, the task force recommends that the President strongly admonish and remind the chairman and members of the board of the grave consequences of their action or inaction. After that, we went to the specific recommendations for the President's consideration, specific charges against particular persons. And I guess by now, alam na ng media what these charges are and who the respondents would be when complaints are filed with the Office of the Ombudsman. But let me just emphasize that further investigation on possible complaints against other officials and employees of PhilHealth, and this is contained in Part 6 of our 177-page report, is also recommended. So marami pa kaming other areas na titingnan. No? Yung legal sector that is ripe for many possible legal actions. But we have not included that in the report as yet dahil we need further supporting evidence to back up the charges that we intend to file. kaya hindi sila nasama dito sa report na ito. But this report, we submitted only because we were required by the President to submit it within 30 days. And we submitted it within the period given to us. But it doesn't mean that yung mga investigations that we have already commenced and those that are already pending will not be continued. So we are assuring the people that investigations on other anomalies or irregularities are being conducted and will continue until we have brought to justice people who are responsible for these anomalies. Thank you, Sec. Ari, thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Secretary Guevara. I'm sure the media will have many, many questions for you. Pero for now po, we will proceed po with our next guest, si Dr. Manolet Dairit. No? Ang susunod po nating panauhin ay isang doktor na naging dekano po ng Ateneo School of Medicine. Ang pananaw po niya ay po pwedeng mabawasan yung social distancing sa pampublikong transportasyon hanggang 0.75. Pero bago po natin mapakinggan si Secretary Dairit, ipiplayback muna po ang posisyon ng DOH at ng DILG na nagsasabi na dapat manatili ang 1 meter social distancing. We will play back this report po of Joseph Morong and GMA. Thank you very much to GMA and to Joseph Morong for this clip. Let's play it back now.
Para sa akin, non-negotiable na isa-sacrifice natin yung 1 meter distance sapagkat yan ay base sa siyensya. Yan din ang sinasabi ng WHO. Kapag binawasan mo yung 1 meter, ay tataas ang porsyento na ikaw ay mahahawa. Ang ibang bansa nga ay 2 metro.
The farther you go, the more effective the risk reduction and the better the protection rate. In fact, at 1 meter distance, you are going to reduce the risk of getting the virus or transferring or contaminating someone.
Dr. Dairit, thank you very much for accepting our invitation to appear in the press briefing. The floor is yours po.
Sige, thank you very much, Secretary Roque. Alam mo, meron akong presentation, it's 5 slides. Ang gagawin ko dito is to explain yung science behind all of these discussions. And ang first point ko dito, well, firstly, ang personality ko dito, I'm speaking as a member of Task Force T3, which is a public-private collaboration. And it's a public-private collaboration that supports government's efforts to control COVID. So one of our, you might say, big initiatives was to help government ramp up the number of laboratories in the country from 1 in February to over 100 now. Okay, so ganun kami tumutulong, pero very low profile kami. So dito, this was the issue of the public transport. So pinag-aaralan rin ng grupo ng Task Force T3, may mga kasamang doktor dyan, and then this, and so we were looking at all of the evidence. And therefore, ito yung first point. The first point is, ang recommendation namin is that we can reduce transmission by having a package of interventions. Kasama na dyan ang face mask, ang face shield, ang no eating in the public transport system, good ventilation, kasama na rin dyan ang physical distancing. Ngayon, ang physical distancing of 1 meter, sinasabi ng, and I will respectfully beg to disagree, ang sinasabi nila, dapat yan, hindi pwedeng i-compromise kasi yan ang sinabi ng WHO. Ngayon, ganito po yung katotohanan dyan. WHO makes certain norms and standards. And you remember, they're trying to do this for all countries. But when they do these norms and standards, hindi po yan dogma. That is not gospel truth. In fact, WHO asks the countries to deal with this according to their own context. And therefore, it is not correct to say na hindi yan pwedeng babaan. Okay? Of course, it protects. But what we're saying is, you have to combine it with other interventions. Ngayon, this picture shows you a situation in Japan where yung social distancing of 1 meter, nagagawa nila doon sa pag-buying of tickets. Pero pag sa train, they're actually closer than less than 1 meter. And many other countries do this kasi ganyan ang situation eh. But you have to apply other measures to ensure that if you are below 1 meter, you are compensating for any loss of protection. Ngayon, I will explain now 2 studies. Ito importante. And I used to do this a lot to talk. And this is the evidence, okay? Now look at this slide. This is a study from Duke University. This is an experiment na ginawa nila. And I'll describe the experiment, okay? Simple lang. Pumunta sila sa laboratorio. Ang ginawa nila, mineasure nila yung droplet output from the mouth of a person using laser technology. And kung titignan ninyo, on the right side, nakikita ba yung none? Pag sinabing none, no mask. Okay? Walang mask na suot. And at none, ang pinaka-extreme case dyan, 1. Ang ibig sabihin yan, yung droplet output mo at no mask is 1. Ngayon ang ginawa nila, they put a mask over the mouth and nose as the person was speaking. Okay? And according to their studies, makikita ninyo, they put in a mask, a bandana mask. For example, yung number 12. Naglagay sila ng cotton mask. Naglagay sila ng iba't ibang mask. Nakikita mo dyan yung drop in the droplet spread. Ang ibig sabihin, ang lumalabas na droplet o laway o tilamsik sa bibig ng isang taong nagsasalita, mineasure nila by laser. Ang nakita ninyo dito, sa pinaka-effective N95 mask, halos 100% walang lumalabas na droplets. At ang surgical mask naman, almost 100%, 99%. So ang ibig sabihin yan, kung gumamit ka ng mask, walang droplet spread, yan nagsasalita na yung tao doon sa experiment nila. Ano pa kung hindi ka magsasalita? Okay? So ito ang isang study that the mask is very effective and you have to wear it properly over your nose and your mouth. Ngayon yung next study, ito medyo mas, komplikado. Next slide. Ayan, ito yung Lancet study. Ito ang kino-quote ng lahat ng mga tao. And ang gagawin ko for the media, i-explain ko sa inyo step by step. Go to the right-hand corner. Ang study came from Lancet, which is a top-notch medical journal. Ang ginawa nilang study nito, hinanap nila lahat ng mga studies in the world on protection against COVID. And they found 172 studies. From those studies, and we go now to the left column, the first 2 columns, tinignan nila yung studies that had anything to say about physical distancing, wearing of face masks, and wearing of eye protection, in this case, face shields. And you can see there, for the first, for physical distancing, they had 9 studies. For face masks, they had 10 studies. And for eye protection, they had 13 studies. Ngayon, anong ginawa nila dyan? Simple ang ginawa nila dyan. Nung tinignan na ngayon nila lahat ng mga studies, pumunta tayo sa gitna ng slide. Nakikita ba ninyo yung intervention group at saka yung comparison group? Ang ginawa ngayon nila, sinabi nila, o yung intervention group, yan ang grupo na gumamit ng physical distancing versus hindi gumamit ng physical distancing. Yan ang grupo na gumamit ng face mask versus not using face mask, and so on and so forth. Yung gumamit ng eye protection at hindi gumamit. Okay? Ngayon, you have to understand na they did these studies independently of all of these interventions. So, ano yan? Isa-isa lang yan. Pero tignan mo yung findings nila. And masisimplify natin. Tignan niyo yung percentages dito. Ang sinasabi nila dito, these are the chance of viral infection. Okay? If you are not wearing a face mask, okay, look at the comparison group. Your chance of infection is 12.9%. I mean for physical distancing. If you are not practicing physical distancing, your chance of infection is 12.9%. So it's not even 100%. Huh? But if you are doing physical distancing of 1 meter or greater, your chance of infection goes down by almost 5 times. At, in this case, 2.6%. Okay? Now, if you look at face mask, if you're not wearing a face mask, your chance of infection is 17.4%. But if you use a face mask, it goes down to 3.1%. And then, if you use a face shield and eye protection, your chance of infection is 16%, but it goes down to 5.5%. So ang ibig sabihin yan, using all of these interventions, you will reduce your risk of infection. Okay? Ngayon, tignan natin how this is, you can look at this, these are by percentages. Look at the third column. Pinag-aralan rin nila yan in terms of yung tatatawag nilang risk. Okay? Ano ba ninyo yung risk? Sabihin natin, kung ang risk ng comparison group at intervention group is equal, okay? Walang diferensya, equal yan. Ang ratio ng risk mo, your risk ratio or your odds ratio, in this case yung tinatawag nilang OR, should be 1. Okay? However, kung walang protection, ibig sabihin, your intervention did not help and in fact, worsen the risk of infection, your odds ratio, OR, would be 2. But if your risk of infection is less than 1, for example, half the risk, your odds ratio would be 0.5. Now, tignan ngayon ninyo yung mga odds ratios, OR, okay? For physical distancing greater than 1, 0.18, ibig sabihin, 5 times less ang risk ng infection when you do physical distancing. When you use face mask, it's 6 times less. And when you use eye protection, it's 3 times less. So ang sinasabi ngayon natin, all of these will help protect. Ngayon, ang issue, bababaan natin yung physical distancing by less than 1 meter to 0.75 to 0.5, even to 0.3. Magkakaroon ka ng less protection, pero ang sinasabi namin, kung ginagamit mo ang face mask, ginagamit mo ang face shield, and you're not talking, you're doing ventilation, disinfection, lahat ito makakatulong to decrease the infection and the risk of infection in public transport. Yan ang mensahe. So, you have to take this as a full package. Okay? Hindi lang physical distancing ang issue dito. It is, if you just argue by physical distancing, that is not the appropriate, I mean, you are missing out on other interventions that we could use. And also, we are doing this only in public transport so that our people can move, so that the economy can open. And this is really our position, okay? Use the 7 commandments, enforce it strictly, and monitor independently. And konti-konti lang so that people get used to it. And this is also important to communicate to the public na dapat walang pasaway. Okay? Because if we do this, we will all protect ourselves from the risk of COVID infection and open up our economy. Thank you very much, Secretary Roque.
Thank you, Dr. Dairit. I hope you can join us for the open forum. Mainit, I'm sure, ang ating open forum ngayon. Let's begin with Yusek Roque. Go ahead, Yusek Roque.
Yes, good afternoon, Secretary Roque. Question po, and Secretary Menardo Guevara and Dr. Dairit. Good afternoon po. From Evelyn Quiroz of Filipino Mirror for Secretary Guevara po. Secretary Guevara, ito po yung una yung tanong. Yung po bang evidence on hand is limited to administrative case only?
No, Evelyn. The evidence available to us will be enough, no, to support both an administrative and a criminal complaint. Kaya lamang we're beefing it up, no. We are trying to beef it up dahil merong mga documents na kailangan pang makuha namin talaga. We know that they are there, but we still have to get them. So your question, hanggang administrative lang ba? No, we have enough evidence also, but we have to secure them, no, they're physically para ma-build up yung case at mapag-file ng maayos na complaint before the office of the Ombudsman. Pati sa criminal meron.
Second question niya, Secretary, magkakaiba ba ang set of evidence submitted sa Senate, House, Ombudsman, at PhilHealth Task Force? Kasi parang iba-iba ang recommendation nila.
Hindi ko masasagot yun, Evelyn, kasi hindi ko naman alam exactly kung ano yung mga ebidensya na iniharap sa House of Representatives or before the Office of the Ombudsman. No? Baka medyo may variance din yan, yung set ng mga ebidensya na na-present. Kaya yun sa task force which was led by the DOJ, ang aming conclusions ay nakasalalay lamang doon sa mga ebidensya na mismong sa amin iniharap. Ngayon, we also made use of certain evidence presented before the Senate, for example, but we cannot really say kung exactly the same set of evidence yung naharap sa Senate at yung sa amin. Kaya magkakaroon ng variations sa appreciation ng evidence kasi hindi naman exactly the same yung na-present.
Yung third question niya, Secretary, can Secretary Duque as well as PhilHealth President Morales be held liable under the doctrine of willful blindness used by DOJ prosecutors in filing anti-money laundering charges against the executives of RCBC in connection with the $81 million cyber heist at the Bank of Bangladesh?
Alam mo, Evelyn, it may be too early, no, to answer that question kasi sabi ko nga sa iyo, kinokompleto pa ang ebidensya, no, na maaring ihain sa Office of the Ombudsman, although we have an idea already what it is, no. But there is a possibility. But right now, ang hawak namin, ang nakikita namin ay hindi pa talaga sufficient, no, para masabi natin na may gross inexcusable negligence on the part of Secretary Duque and members of the board.
Salamat, Secretary Guevara.
Thank you, Yusek. Joyce Balancho of DZMM, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Secretary Roque, and to our guests. Doon lang po sa naging meeting ni Pangulong Duterte with Congress leaders kagabi, Secretary Roque, si Senate President Tito Soto said that the President gave PhilHealth Chief Dante Gueran a deadline up to December this year to fix the corruption issues in PhilHealth. Can you give us more details on this? And also, ibig sabihin po ba nito maikli lang ang term ni, posibleng maikli lang ang term ni PhilHealth Chief Dante Gueran? We thought that he was given an assignment for the next 2 years or until the term of the President ends. But it appears na yung termino niya nakadepende sa performance niya as Chief ng PhilHealth.
Well, let's put it this way, no? The President wants to clean up PhilHealth, and that is why the deadline given to Attorney Gueran is to enable him, or a deadline to clean up the organization. File all the cases that need to be filed, suspend, terminate, whatever you need to do in order to cleanse the ranks of PhilHealth. Hindi naman po ibig sabihin na ang termino niya ay hanggang dun lamang. But since I was not physically present during the meeting, I can only rely on the statement made by Tito Soto, which was corroborated to me by Majority Floor Leader Martin Romualdez.
How about, sir, can you give us more details dito sa sinasabing pabor si President Duterte either i-privatize or i-abolish ang PhilHealth if in case Dante Gueran fails to fix the corruption problems within the agency? And also, I think, dagdag ko na rin po na pag-usapan yung bill ni Senator Soto about transferring the chairmanship of PhilHealth to Secretary of Finance.
Okay. Ang pagkakaintindi ko, talagang ang paninindigan ni Presidente either i-abolish or i-privatize yan. At sinabi naman po niya yan sa pagpupulong niya sa ilang miyembro ng IATF. No? At ganyan din po yung original bill ko na hinain sa 17th Congress, i-abolish yung PhilHealth, palitan ng National Health Service. Pero ang pagkakaintindi ko po, sabi ni Senate President Tito Soto, wag muna, tignan muna natin kung malilinis ang PhilHealth at tignan natin kung mareremedyohan dito sa kanyang proposed bill na gawing chairman nga ng Board of Directors ng PhilHealth, ang Secretary of Finance at hindi ang Secretary of Health dahil ang primary function naman ng PhilHealth is that of an insurance business and therefore it should be the Secretary of Finance and not the Secretary of Health chairing the board.
All right. Secretary, sa ibang topic lang po, recent survey conducted by the Asian Development Bank or ADB showed that the Philippine households were among the worst affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. 84% daw po of households in the country said that their income has declined at ito daw po yung worst in the region. And your reaction to this? And sabi din po doon, yung ating micro, small, and medium enterprises are the most affected business. They have the potential to grow in the digital platform or digital arena, but it is hampered by internet connectivity issues.
Well, on your first point, malungkot po talaga yan, no, na talagang napakadami pong naghirap dahil sa pandemya. Hindi naman po natin ninais to. Talaga naman pong, kung hindi naman tayo nag-ECQ, baka mas marami talaga sa atin na nagkasakit. No? So malungkot na katotohanan po yan. Pero lahat naman po yung ginagawa natin para makaahon ng lahat. Ito po ang dahilan kung bakit ang kampanya natin ngayon ay Ingat Buhay para sa hanap buhay. Dahil makakabangon lang tayo kung tayo po ay babalik sa ating mga hanap buhay. Pagdating po doon sa digital business, ini-encourage din po natin yan. At sabi nga po ng ADB, it is hampered by poor internet infrastructure. Pero kanina po, narinig ko naman po si dating Yusek Rio sa radyo na nagsasabi na mas mataas pa talaga actually ang speed ng internet natin kaysa dun sa sinabi ni Secretary Gringo Onasan sa Kamara de Representante. Ang sabi kasi ni Senator Gringo, mga 7 to 8 Mbph lang tayo, pero ang sabi ni Yusek Rio ay nasa 20 na tayo. No? But we can do better and we will do better. When I was in Congress, isa po sa sinulong natin yung libreng internet and we will make sure po that now that we're in the executive, na yung libreng internet talaga ay ma-implement on a nationwide basis. Thank you very much.
Last na po for me, Secretary.
Yes.
Sige po.
Ano yan?
Sige po. The Office of the Ombudsman po, Secretary Roque, has limited the access of public to the SALNs of different public officials, including the President. In its memorandum, it released recently, it only allows the release of SALN for official investigations, court order, or those approved by the subject of the SALN itself. Some are saying it is in violation of the Constitution, Secretary Roque. Is it not going against our policy of transparency and accountability?
Alam niyo po, meron tayong talagang Office of the Ombudsman, which is the constitutional body, no, in the 87 Constitution to promote accountability for public officers. Kung meron pong ganyang rule ang Ombudsman as the specialized constitutional agency to promote accountability, kinakailangan respetuhin po. Thank you very much, Joyce. Back again to you, Roque.
Yes, Secretary, question from Arian Meres of ABS-CBN. Yung question niya, halos katulad din nung kay Joyce, pero may dagdag siya dito, with the Ombudsman daw po latest policy on SALN, is President Duterte open to making public his own SALN for 2018 and 2019 for transparency, and why?
We respect po the constitutional prerogative of a constitutional body such as the Ombudsman. We will leave the matter to the Ombudsman. We respect his prerogatives.
Yung second question po niya, nasagot nyo na tanong na rin ni Joyce. Yung third question niya, LTFRB Chair Martin Delgra said they hope to resume provincial bus operations in Metro Manila this month. Has this been discussed by the IATF and what is the decision?
Sinisimulan na po ang diskusyon yan. It's ongoing.
Thank you, Secretary.
Thank you, Yusek. Punta tayo kay Trish Tirada of CNN Philippines, please.
Hi, good afternoon po, Secretary, at sa mga guests po natin. Sir, before I go to the issue on reduced physical distancing, I'll go first about yung internet po natin dito sa Philippines, because yesterday, the ITC Secretary Gringo Nasan said in a House hearing that internet in the Philippines is not bad. Baka lang, sir, may update po tayo sa your reaction to this, sir, and baka lang po may update tayo about telcos compliance dun sa SONA statement ng Pangulo na they should improve their services by December, otherwise they might be closed down.
Number one, Secretary Gringo Onasan was absolutely correct. It's not too bad compared to, or it's not bad compared to our neighbors. As in fact, it is better than what was stated by Secretary Onasan, as mentioned by former Yusek Rio. No? It's higher, a lot higher than what was mentioned by Secretary Onasan. Number two, alam na po natin kung anong ginagawa ng Presidente bukod doon sa ultimatum na binigay sa mga telco providers natin, gumawa na rin ng hakbang ang Presidente para masigurado na yung mga pangangailangan ng telcos, lalong-lalo na yung mas mabilisang approval pagdating doon sa mga lokal na pamahalaan sa pagtatayo ng mga towers at other infrastructure, mawala ang red tape dyan. Ibig sabihin, wala na pong dahilan ng mga telcos sa mga darating na panahon para hindi magbigay ng mas mabuting serbisyo. Sa panahon na talagang pati sa edukasyon, nangangailangan tayo ng internet, inaasahan po ng Presidente na dahil ginawa naman niya ang kanyang obligasyon na sabihan ng mga lokal na pamahalaan dahil silang sinisisi ng telcos to shape up, hindi na po tatanggap ng kahit anong alabay ang Presidente in the future kung hindi po mapabuti ang ating telecom sa bansa.
Secretary, doon naman po sa reduced distancing, is the IATF at least considering to increase yung vehicles and open more routes if the goal is to accommodate more passengers and increase transport capacity? And at the same time, we read the statement of Senator Bongo earlier. He's recommending na pag-aralan yung pagbibigay ng subsidy for affected drivers. Kaya pa po ba ito, sir, ng ating budget?
Number one, the subsidy for the drivers is in Bayanihan 2. And kaya nga bibigyan po ng subsidy dyan kasi kinakailangan yung social distancing. Kapag lumarga po sila na 1 meter distancing, effectively po yan, hindi po yan 50%. Effectively, mga 20% lang po yan. Kaya kinakailangan ng subsidy dahil hindi sila mabubuhay, they will not even break even. No? So yung subsidy na bibigay natin sa Bayanihan 2 is enough to make it break even for them plus a little profit of about 20%, I think. No? Number two, sagad na nga po yung ating transportasyon na pinalalabas ngayon. No? At ang solusyon nga po is damihan yung mga pasahero na po pwedeng isakay ng ating mga pampublikong transportasyon. Pero lahat po yan ay kinonsidera ng DOTR at ng IATF.
Secretary, this question may be answered by you or Dr. Dairit because I was listening to Dr. Dairit's presentation earlier and nabanggit nga po yung effectivity ng masks and all these efforts combined. No? Sir, when we recommended this reduced physical distancing, was kumbaga yung culture and compliance also taken into consideration because nabanggit nyo nga po, iba-iba yung klase ng mask na ginagamit and yung pag-comply din po, are we confident that everybody can fully comply to this, na everyone's capable of really properly wearing masks when we suggested this? Isn't it better, sir, if we go on the more conservative measure na ipapanatili po itong 1 meter distance considering nga po other factors that may affect our compliance to the health standards?
Secretary Dairit? Dr. Dairit?
Yes. Thank you for that question. Well, the compliance is very important. And therefore, we're saying you need to enforce it and you need to monitor it. Okay? But the reason we're doing this is because we're trying to balance it with the needs of the economy opening up. And therefore, there's your trade-off there. But really, the trade-off doesn't leave us defenseless. That's what we're saying. Okay? As long as you use these 7 commandments, you can reduce the risk of infection. Okay? And anywhere in the world, that's the same thing. You have to comply with whatever you can use in order for your own context in order to succeed?
On my part, ibabalik ko po yung ating kampanya ngayon, Ingat Buhay para sa Hanap Buhay. No? Kasama po sa pag-iingat buhay, sa public transportation, mask, shield, walang magsasalita, walang kakain, kinakailangan mag-disinfect at pati po yung mga pampublikong transportasyon dapat i-disinfect. Kahapon po, mga around 7 in the evening, dumaan po ako dyan sa EDSA sa harap ng Mega Mall. Nakita ko po ang pila sa MRT, 1 kilometro. Kung ganong kahaba po ang Mega Mall, ganong kahaba po ang pila. At yan po ay dahil nga kakaunti lamang ang sinasakay natin. So pagdating po sa compliance, pagdating po sa MRT, LRT, sila na po ang nagde-determine how many can actually ride per couch. No? And dahil nga po dyan, napakahaba ng pilang nakita ko kagabi.
Sir, singit ko lang po, sir, yung national state of calamity, will it be extended?
Yes, definitely. It's in the desk of the President, probably signed by now, on its way down to the Office of the Executive Secretary.
Salamat po sa inyo, Secretary. At
Thank you,
Dr.
Trish.
Dairit.
Back to you, Sec. Roque, please.
Secretary, tanong ni MJ Blancaflor of Daily Tribune. Senator Soto said President Duterte favored his proposal that the Finance Secretary should serve as ex-officio chair of PhilHealth instead of the DOH Secretary. Does it mean that the President agrees that the DOH Secretary has been wearing too many hats?
You know, I was not physically present. I take, of course, the statement of Senator Soto as gospel truth. And of course, it makes sense because it should be run as an insurance company. Although there is huge of a difference also between an ordinary insurance company and PhilHealth because as author of the Universal Healthcare Law, hindi dependent ang PhilHealth sa contributions ng members. Kapag magkukulang, talagang tutustusan ng gobyerno. And that's the difference between a purely insurance company and universal healthcare.
Second question po niya, may we get the palace reaction on the remarks made by retired Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio that the administration has no coherent foreign policy. He observed the President's changing tones on our relationship with China and the U.S.
On the contrary, the President has been consistent in espousing an independent foreign policy. We will promote the national interest first and foremost, and we will be friends to everyone and enemies to no one.
Senior Associate Justice Carpio also said that President Duterte relied on knee-jerk reactions in terminating VFA and granting absolute pardon to Pemberton. How will the palace respond to that?
Well, as I have given my personal opinion on the basis of everything that I've heard from the President, it is for a higher national interest.
Thank you,
Yes.
Secretary.
Thank you, Yusek. Punta naman tayo kay Melo Acuña.
Mr. Secretary, good afternoon. Will you confirm the report that the President is seriously considering the transfer of chairmanship of PhilHealth to Secretary Sandy Dominguez of the Department of Finance?
Well, I will confirm that the President had favorable reaction to it, but it really is the call of the legislative branch of government because PhilHealth was created pursuant to law, amended by the Universal Healthcare Law, and it depends on the wisdom of Congress. If they feel that the legislative basis for the existence of PhilHealth should be amended, so be it. The President will respect that.
Yes. Will it not run contrary to the charter of the PhilHealth, which says that the Secretary of Health is the ex-officio chairperson and the President and CEO of the corporation shall be the vice chairperson of the board?
That's according to law because the charter is a law which can always be
Yes,
amended
precisely.
by Congress.
Okay. Do you think we have the luxury of time to amend the law to respond to the crisis that is perceived and experienced by PhilHealth members?
I think Congress, this particular Congress, has a proven track record of passing relevant and urgent legislation at the soonest time possible.
Yeah. For Secretary Menardo Guevara, with your indulgence, Mr. Secretary.
Yes,
Secretary
Melo.
Guevara. Yes, magandang tanghali po. Ano na po ang efforts ng Department of Justice to decongest and make sure that our jails under your supervision will be safe sapagkat may mga nabalita na nagka-COVID-19 sa piitang pambansa ng Pilipinas? Ano na po ang inyong efforts to reduce the concern of the relatives of the inmates inside the jails.
Melo, let me just make a differentiation, ha. Yung
Yes,
mga
please.
city jails where persons are being detained while awaiting trial, no? Yan ay under the jurisdiction of the BJMP, no?
Yes.
Board. Yeah, you know that, and that's under the DILG. Yung under the DOJ, yung Bucor, Bureau
Yes.
of Correction, yung prisons where sentenced persons would be placed, no? So, ang mga nagawa na ng ano dyan, ng DOJ dyan, through Bucor, actually it's Bucor, not the DOJ. Kasi ang DOJ is exercising administrative supervision over the Bucor only. Pero yung operational aspect niyan is really Bucor. So, ang magawa ng Bucor, to minimize yung congestion and infection ng COVID-19, they have already put the necessary quarantine facilities there, no? And hired more medical personnel to attend to the needs of the PDLs doon sa kanilang NBT hospital inside. On the part of the DOJ naman, naglabas kami ng interim guidelines para doon sa more expedient and faster processing ng mga ng parole at saka ng executive clemency, at ang binibigyan ng priority dito ay yung mga may edad na, no, yung mga matatanda at yung mga may sakit. So on our part, yun ang ginawa namin, at marami nang na-process ang Board of Pardons and Parole na maparole o makapag-submit ng application for pardon sa Office of the President by virtue of this abbreviated and simplified procedure, no, for application. Mas kaunti na ang hinihinging requirements at mas maiksi na ang panahon na ginugugol para sa processing ng ganitong mga applications.
Opo, nadagdagan po ba yung budget ng Bucor para sa health services? Sapagkat mukhang ito yata ang isang problema eh.
Melo, sad to say, doon sa in-approve ng DBM ay nabawasan ang budget ng Bucor, no? Kaya I'm hoping na during the budget deliberations, I don't know if it's still possible, na sana at least on the medical facilities inside Bucor ay magkaroon ng some additional allocations, no, para hindi na kailangan pa na ilabas ang ating mga inmates, no, na may medical needs, na doon na lang mismo sa loob yung mga basic medical treatment ay doon na lang gawin at hindi na ilabas. Kasi yung talagang medyo complicated na ng konti, lalabas pa yan eh. So may security problem pa, meron pang, stuff like that. Kaya tama yung punto mo, no, na mas maganda sana kung magkaroon ng more appropriations para sa medical facilities inside Bucor.
Yeah. Keep us posted, dahil sa siguro kung merong big name na mahahatulan, mapapasok sa loob, baka gumanda yung budget. Ano po kaya?
Okay. Thank you very much, Melo. Thank you, Sec.
Hindi naman para doon sa mga may kaya lang ito eh. Hindi para doon sa mas kawawa.
Opo, salamat po. Thank you, Secretary Harris.
Thank you very much po. Back to you, Sec Roque.
Yes, Secretary, question for Secretary Roque and Secretary Guevara from Chris Jose of Remate Online. May panawagan daw po si ACT CIS Party List Representative Jocelyn Tulfo na isailalim sa hospital arrest si dating PhilHealth Chief Ricardo Morales matapos irekomenda ng task force ang paghahain ng kaso laban sa kanya kaugnay sa mga irregularidad sa state insurer. Batid naman ng publiko na nagbitiw na sa pwesto si Morales matapos imungkahi ni Pangulong Duterte dahil sa kanyang sakit. Sa tingin nyo, kailangan po ba talaga na isailalim sa hospital arrest si Morales? Ano ba dapat ang maging panuntunan bago payagan na ang isang nasangkot sa kontrobersya na may sakit ay isailalim sa hospital arrest o kaya naman ay sa house arrest?
Secretary Guevara.
Ko ba sasagot?
Yes, Sec. If you care to answer.
If you may. Itong hospital arrest kasi pinag-uusapan ito pag yung kaso ay nasa husgado na, no? In the case of violators ng Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Law, pagka nasa Sandigan Bayan na. Isa ngayon ay yung complaint ay ipa-file pa lang, no? At pag-file niyan sa ombudsman, ang ombudsman ay magko-conduct ng sarili niyang fact-finding and preliminary investigation. At kung merong finding sila ng probable cause at saka pa lang yan aakyat sa korte, no, sa Sandigan Bayan. Kaya yung matter of arrest, lumilitaw yun, nalalabas na lang yun pagka yung kaso ay nakarating na sa husgado. Kaya sa ngayon ay hindi pa natin pinag-uusapan yung tungkol sa arrest. Kasi yun nga, complaint pa lang, di pa nga napapile, ipa-file pa lang eh. Kaya too early para pag-usapan yan. And besides, merong discretion to or authority to decide on that will be the court itself. Depende sa actual circumstances.
Yes, thank you. Next question, please. Joseph Morong na pala tayo. Thank you, Yusek and Tayusek.
Hi, sir. Good afternoon. Secretaries, good afternoon. My first question would be to Secretary Guevara. Hi, sir.
Hi, Joseph.
Finally, live. Sir, can you quantify, sir? I've asked this question to Secretary Roque before, but I'd like to pose the question to you if you have the figures. Can you quantify the amount that is either lost from the government or went into the pockets of some corrupt officials sa PhilHealth based on your investigation? Or if you don't have the figures, how would you describe, sir, the corruption in PhilHealth from what you have discovered in your investigation?
Joseph, it's rather difficult to make an estimate, no? Kasi on the part of the task force, ay hindi naman lahat ng areas na tingin namin ay may possible irregularity ay natingnan namin, no? We have only explored certain areas like ITM, or rather IRM, ICT, procurement, and so forth and so on. But based on what we have seen, and this has been going on for many years, no? Like yung mga nagpa-file ng fraudulent claims, padding, and so forth and so on. We believe that we are talking about hundreds of billions of pesos here, no, over the years. So definitely I cannot give you any parang reasonable figure to go by, but we're talking about the magnitude of hundreds of billions over the years.
How do you describe, sir, the corruption in PhilHealth?
Yung corruption in PhilHealth, ang tingin ko dyan ay na-engender because of a culture of tolerance. Yung parang hindi sila naghihigpit among themselves, no, for some reason or another. Kaya over the years, parang na-tolerate yung ganyan mga practices. The various complaints, legal actions that should be taken against wrongdoers have not been filed, have not been acted upon really actively. Kaya parang nagkakaroon ng ng parang culture na well, I wouldn't say impunity, no, but something like a culture of tolerance na hayaan mo na lang yung tipong ganun, no. And so parang I hope I'm not doing an unfair statement because I know na marami rin namang mga taong matitino at gumagawa ng kanilang trabaho ng mahusay sa PhilHealth. Pero we have seen it already, no? The Congress, the task force, the many cases already filed before the Ombudsman, before the Civil Service Commission. Nakikita na natin kung gaano kalawak at kung gaano nakatagal ito. So, bakit nangyari ito na for so many years ay walang pagbabago sa PhilHealth? So, yun nga parang naging culture na parang nagbibigayan na rin, papasensyahan na, they tolerate each other. Kaya kailangan nga na some very definitive action will have to be taken, no? Some drastic action para mawala yung ganyang culture na parang nakakalusot yung mga ganyang irregularity or anomaly. Time to stop.
Time to stop, sir. Yes. Sir, since you mentioned the very definitive action, given what you have discovered, do you think that PhilHealth, as of today, or based on your investigation, it is beyond salvation such that it's better to abolish it? And the related question is, when are you going to file the complaint, sir?
Well, yung filing of the complaints, we hope to be able to do so within the next 30 days. No? Kasi we have to gather the necessary supporting documentary evidence. As I was mentioning earlier, we know where they are, but physically, we have to obtain them para ma-attach sa complaint. So that takes some time also. No? Now, as to the matter of what to do sa PhilHealth, well, of course, there are proposals na i-abolish na lang yan. or palitan na lang yan ng some new institution or what. No? Pero ako, ang tingin ko, baka naman meron pang po pwedeng gawin. That's why we recommended to the President to direct the GCG, the Governance Commission for Government-Owned and Controlled Corporations, para gumawa ng sarili nilang evaluation for a possible reorganization of PhilHealth. And maybe in the interim, the creation of an interim management committee. Kasi when we go to Congress, Congress can very easily do that. But it will take some time also because of the congressional legislative process. Yes. So in the meantime, within the executive department, that is what I can see. Nandiyan yung GCG, meron siyang power to introduce or to recommend reorganization, partial or total reorganization without really abolishing the entity. No? So I guess we could explore that option muna kasi that is less drastic than abolishing or privatizing the corporation.
Sir, thank you for your time. Secretary Roque, my question is for you now. Sir, kagabi po, dun sa thread ng MPC kay SBG kay Senator Bongo, it seems like the President is giving PhilHealth President Geran until December to clean up PhilHealth. Otherwise, he would explore an option of privatizing it or abolishing it. Sir, tama ba yung interpretation na this is an ultimatum for PhilHealth to shape up? Otherwise, they will have to change.
It is an ultimatum. You need to clean up PhilHealth by the end of the year.
Okay. Sir, sa physical distancing, bakit po sinuspend ng DOTR yung kanilang circular? And is the DOTR willing or ready to withdraw it totally in light of a new letter from HPAAC na natanggap ng Palasyo advocating against the reduction? And what Senator Goy said in his statement that as an alternative, you just have to give more PUVs.
Well, una-una meron pong rekomendasyon ng IATF. No? So the recommendation remains, but it's up to the President whether or not to approve the recommendation. Pero kanina po, nung nagsalita si Secretary Tugade, ang sabi niya, because I don't want to pressure the President into making his decision as if he is, duty-bound to make it within a period of time. So parang, dahil kung i-implement yan, parang it becomes urgent, the President must act on it right away. No? So sabi niya, to give the President all the time that he needs to study the matter, balik muna tayo sa 1 meter. And until he says so, we will not implement the 0.75. Yan po ang sabi niya kanina sa ITF.
Can I go to Secretary, to Dr. Dayrit, please?
Yes, please.
Still have time.
Okay, go ahead.
Dr. Dayrit, good afternoon. Thank you for the presentation. We appreciate it. But I'd like to focus, sir, lang on the weather, kasi baka yung isipin ng mga tao na, pwede na ba na tayong maglapit-lapit? Parang ang dating sa kanila is that COVID is less deadly. So just focusing, sir, on the 1 meter, without the interventions that you mentioned, like face mask wearing, and then the face shield. So just 1 meter, yung 1 meter po or anything less than that, is that safe?
Graduated yung protection. Okay. Graduated the protection. So, based on the studies, the protection is highest if it's 1 meter or greater.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Thank you, Sec Guevara, and thank you, Dr. Dayrit. Back to you, Sec Roque, please.
Yes, Secretary, from Marisal Halili, Senate President Tito Soto said President Duterte wants PhilHealth to be abolished or privatized. Can you confirm this? What does the President want to happen to PhilHealth?
Already answered po.
What do you think of the bill filed by Senate President Soto making the Finance Secretary as PhilHealth's chair of board instead of the Health Secretary? SP Soto said PRD agreed to the proposal. Why is this logical?
Already answered na po.
From Jillian Cortez of Business World, Manila's ranking in the Global Smart City Index 2020 went down by 10 places this year, 104th out of 109 countries from being 94th last year. Road congestion, corruption, healthcare, air pollution, and unemployment were the top 5 areas identified identified as the most urgent by citizens. What is the palace reaction to this?
Hindi ko pa po nakikita yung study na yan. No? It's the first time I heard about it. Pero siguro po, ginawa nila yung study bago matapos itong mga napakadaming proyekto natin under build. Kung kailan lang po, para ako'y pag-uwi ko sa probinsya, napakadali na po ng pag-uwi ko sa probinsya dahil malapit sa Malacanang, gawa na po yung Harbor Link. No? Pagkatapos niyan, yung exit ng T-Plex ay hanggang Rosario na po. So napakadali ko nang umuwi ng probinsya, no? 3 oras na lang. Bukod pa dyan, napakarami pa pong mga proyektong na-inaugurate na natin, yung sa Calax, at marami pong mga proyekto na magpapatuloy at nagpapatuloy na po ngayon. No? So, I can assure you po that by the end of the term of the President, pagdating po doon sa sinasabi nilang road congestion, yan po ay magkakaroon na ng lunas. No? Sa EDSA po, magkakaroon na tayo ng lunas dahil magkakaroon na po tayo ng connector linking sa South Expressway with the North Expressway at patapos na po yan. In fact, kung manggagaling po ako sa Pasay coming here to Malacanang, I use part of that connector na po, no? At napakadali makarating po sa Malacanang. Pagdating po sa corruption, number 1 po yan sa agenda ng Presidente. Siguro hindi po yan ang kinonsidera ng Global Smart City. Sa healthcare po, dahil nga po sa pandemya, napilitan talaga tayo na palakasin ang ating healthcare capacity at ngayon po, we are rushing to build 54,000 bed capacities pa to comply with the WHO minimum standard na sinabi po kahapon ni Chief Implementer Galvez. Pagdating po sa air pollution, well, ang naging benefit po talaga ng ating quarantine, makikita nyo naman talagang luminis ang Metro Manila, no? At ang unemployment po, well, kaya po kinakailangan pag-ingatan ang kalusugan, pag-ingatan ng buhay para tayo po ay makapaghanap buhay dahil dyan lang po talaga natin mabibigyan ng lunas ang unemployment. We go now to Pia Ranada, please.
Hi, sir. Hi, sirs. Can I first go to Secretary Guevara?
Go ahead, please.
Hi, Pia.
All right. Secretary Guevara, did the President's statements before you finished your probe on PhilHealth, when he was saying that he fully trusts Secretary Duque, did that affect in any way the conclusions that the task force made on who to file charges against?
Not at all, Pia. Walang epekto yon as far as the task force is concerned, more particularly the DOJ. As I repeatedly have said before, we will only go by the evidence presented before us. So kung meron kaming makita, so be it. Kung wala naman, wala. Pero kung meron, meron. Kung meron kaming nakitang position against him, we'll include him and probably the rest of the board if need be.
Mm-hmm. Sir, you mentioned in your report that the fact that the people who asked for approval of the board hid certain documents is a mitigating factor in your decision to just give an admonishment to the board. So, sir, isn't it though part of due diligence for the board to check if there was duplicity, to maybe catch any hiding or any parang efforts to hide certain documents? I mean, wouldn't they have caught that if they did their due diligence?
Actually, kung talagang you will exert due diligence, no, you might have probably discovered that. But considering that, the board is generally a policy-making body, and really the operational side is being done by the executive committee, chances are pagdating sa board mismo, no, which basically makes decisions on policy directions, no, ay talagang siguro baka in practice baka kulang na rin sila ng time and effort para kumbaga parang repasuhin, no, na sila mismo ang mismong magbubusisi niyan, so to speak, no. Kaya it's really quite of necessity na parang you will have to rely on the inputs being submitted to you by the executive committee, which is really the operational side of the whole thing, because this is composed of the senior vice presidents and the president of the company itself, of the corporation itself.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sir, can I go now to Secretary Roque? Just you mentioned earlier the Ombudsman's rules on restricting public access to SALNs, but precisely the rules of the Ombudsman say that it's now dependent on the official himself to decide whether or not to release the SALN. So actually the ball is in the court of the President and not with the Ombudsman. So given this, sir, I've asked this for I think 3 press conferences already. When will the President actually release his 2018 and 2019 SALNs? And isn't the delay in this actually indicative that you're actually not being transparent to the public?
Well, on the contrary, the president has filed. The remedy is to go to the ombudsman for a copy of the SALN you're not able to get it from the agency itself, but you have to comply with the requirements of the ombudsman.
So, sir, the Malacanang will allow for people, if someone requests for the SALN, you will assure that the person will receive the SALN upon request.
We will comply with the procedure prescribed by the ombudsman.
Okay.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
sir, no assurance that anyone who, if I were to ask for it, following all the rules of the ombudsman, the palace will release it to me.
Yes, if you comply with the procedure and the guidelines of the ombudsman. Okay?
Okay, sir.
Thank you very
Last
much.
question. Pwede po ba?
Thank you, Pia. We go to Yusek Roque now.
Yes, Secretary, question from Virgil Lopez of GMA News. The U.S. Marine Corps said in a report that Joseph Scott Pemberton won't face court-martial proceedings, saying they will not try Pemberton a second time for the same crime. However, they said Pemberton will be processed for administrative discharge. Will the Philippine government ask the U.S. Marine Corps to reconsider and hold the court-martial proceedings?
That's a decision of the U.S. government. Although I take note that they have said that he will be processed for administrative discharge, meaning he will be fired as a Marine.
Second question, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Michelle Bachelet has called on the Philippine government to revoke the policies that allegedly resulted in human rights violations under the drug war. She also urged Philippine officials to halt the use of rhetoric inciting violence against people who use or sell drugs. Ano daw po ang reaction ng palace dito?
With all due respect to Madame Bachelet, as a former president of Chile, she knows that we have domestic institutions to promote accountability. We will rely on this domestic institution. And as of now, all institutions, whether be it the DOJ, the courts, the CHR, and other remedies are available to those who claim to be victims of human rights violations. We are not in default of our obligation to provide victims with an adequate domestic remedy.
Third question niya, the DSWD is expecting poor families to increase to 20 million next year due to the effects of the pandemic. Will there be bigger appropriations for cash doles than proposed?
Ganito na lang po, no? Kaya maraming nagugutom ngayon kasi nga sinara natin ang ekonomiya, kinakailangan buksan natin para mas mapakaunti natin yung mga numero ng mga nagugutom. At ang tingin ko ang solusyon sa kagutuman ay buksan ang ekonomiya at palusugin natin ang ating ekonomiya.
Opo, Secretary, marami-rami pa rin po ang tanong dito. Yung tanong ni Julie Aurelio na sagot niyo na rin po about PhilHealth corruption at pati yung physical distancing, kung announcement soon. Ito po yung tanong ni Julie Aurelio. Can we, for Secretary Roque, can we get details about President Duterte's late-night motorcycle ride as posted on Facebook by Senator Go? Does the palace believe that this should dispel doubts or speculations on the President's state of health?
Res ipsa loquitur po. The thing speaks for itself. So hayaan nyo na pong makita yan ng taong bayan. And they can make their own conclusions about the President's health.
Jinky Baticados ng IBC 13, nasagot nyo na rin po, pero aware daw po ba si Secretary Duque dun sa recommendation or yung Senate President Soto proposed a bill na DOF Secretary ang upo pa as PhilHealth Chair?
I think by now he should be aware because it's all over the media now.
Kay Jinky Baticados pa rin ng IBC 13, please elaborate din po yung sa willing daw po si Pangulo na masummon sa congressional hearings that would tackle bills seeking to cut red tape and corruption.
That's to indicate talaga the urgency by which the President views this problem of red tape. No? Pero I understand, ang sabi naman ni Tito Sen, hindi naman namin kayo isasama, imbitahin if need be. But it shows that the President's resolve to work together with Congress to provide a solution to red tape.
From Summit Enilia, earlier na cite po ni Health Secretary Duque ang estimate ng HPAC na magkaroon ng additional 20,518 new COVID-19 cases per month. Kung magre-relax ng physical distancing measures sa PUVs, kaya po ba ito ma-absorb ng existing critical care capacity sa Metro Manila?
Well, unang-una, marami pong mga miyembro ng IATF that expressed doubts over that model. To begin with, that model was prepared overnight po, literally. Number two po, it has never been validated. No? But number three, in answer to your question, nakita nyo naman po sa ating COVID report, nasa 50% po more or less ang ating health capacity at pinaghahandaan po natin ang pagkakasakit ng mas marami pa, wag naman sana po, no? Pero dahil nagbubukas nga tayo ng ekonomiya, kinakailangan paghandaan yung mga magkakasakit na critical at saka severe at salamat naman po sa Panginoon, kakaunti lang naman po ang nakakasakit ng severe at na critical.
Kung na-publish na po ba ang Any Bayanihan 2 Law?
Nabasa ko po siya sa bulletin, no? Kahapon. Hindi ko po nabasa sa ibang periodiko pa, pero nasa National Printing Office po ngayon.
Kung nag-decide po si President Duterte na kung regarding daw po sa recommendation ng DOLE to extend the exemption period for medical workers sa temporary deployment ban ng POEA?
I promised Secretary Bello I will bring it up to the President in our next meeting, and this will be on Monday.
From Jonah Villaviray ng Asahi Simbon, ano daw po ang reason for the delay in submitting the report about the required minimum distance for commuters in public transport?
Kahapon lang naman po ng meeting ng IATF, so hindi naman po substantial yung delay na yan.
From Ace Romero to Secretary Guevara, did President Duterte's remarks that Secretary Duque is not corrupt, that he only thinks there was just negligence, influence the findings of the multi-agency task force?
Already answered. Already answered.
Question for Secretary Guevara pa rin daw po, and Secretary Roque. The investigation on PhilHealth has just begun. When will the agencies complete their investigation? What other aspects are being looked into?
Right now, we're focusing on another sector, no, na hindi nakasama doon sa report na sinabit namin to the President. We're looking at the legal sector. So for those that we have already identified, yung sa IRM at saka yung sa ICT or procurement, no? So possibly within the month ay mapafile na in 30 days yung complaints pertaining to this. Yung sa legal sector, maybe in another 2 months.
From Julie Aurelio, Senator Risa Ontiveros says the government may have lost 1 billion pesos after DBM purchased PPEs from 5 Chinese companies instead of giving contracts to local manufacturers. What is the policy's take on the issue, and will President Duterte order an investigation?
Alam nyo, pagdating sa overpricing ng PPE, lininaw na po yan ng Presidente doon sa isang ulat niya sa bayan. At talagang nagkaroon po ng absolute transparency pagdating sa pag-purchase ng PPE. At isipin po natin, pinurchase natin yung PPE na yan sa kasagsagan ng ating ECQ, no? At saka MECQ, kung saan kakaunti pa rin ang supply. Yung mga panahon na yun, nagsisimula pa lang po yung mga lokal na kumpanya na mag-produce ng PPE na sa pamamagitan ng pag-angkat ng mga imported materials nga po at dito ginagawa. No? So yung mga panahon na yun, wala naman tayong choice kundi bumili rin ng mga imported PPE. So anyway, to Secretary Risa Ontiveros, bukas po ang Ombudsman, bukas po ang DOJ. Kung meron po kayong ebidensya, magdemanda po kayo.
So mga tatlong question na lang po to from Karen Lema ng Reuters. Is the government keen on relaxing further the deployment ban on HCWs? Has that been tabled in IATF meetings? And do you think the President will approve it? How long do you expect the travel ban on healthcare workers to remain in place?
Ang proposal po ni Secretary Bello is to allow the nurses and other health professionals with papers completed as of August 31 to be allowed to depart the country. Hanggang dun pa lang po at hindi pa po yan na-aproba ng Presidente.
From Ace Romeros, how can you agree with the ICT that our internet connection in the Philippines is not that bad when the administration even deferred the opening classes mainly due to connectivity issues?
Hindi ko po alam. That's actually a point for debate, no? Pero ang sinasabi ko po, hindi lang po yan ang sole consideration ng presidente. It was the president that decided. It was primarily an issue of safety, no, and preparedness, no, not necessarily internet connectivity. Pero lilinawin ko po, there's always room for improvement. And bilang naging author po ng libreng internet, isa po yan sa bagay na gusto ko rin i-discuss sa DICT, paano namin mapapatupad na yung batas na yan, because that's the law, to provide for free internet connectivity.
Last question po from Evelyn Quiroz ng Filipino Mirror for Secretary Guevara. Do you think you have an airtight case against the PhilHealth officials?
Well, for those na na-identify na namin, I think we have sufficient evidence para makonsider ito ng ombudsman for the possible finding of probable cause. But we will not preempt the ombudsman. From our point of view, I am saying that we have sufficient evidence.
Thank you, Secretary Guevara. Thank you, Secretary Roque. Thank you, Dr. Dairit.
Yeah, I'd like to exercise the prerogative of the moderator, no, in the open forum. Secretary Guevara, Attorney Jojo Del Rosario, head of legal of PhilHealth, posted in his Facebook that he's already celebrating that he was not amongst those charged by Task Force PhilHealth. Should he really be celebrating already? Attorney Jojo Del Rosario, former head of legal of PhilHealth.
Sec Harry, kasasabi ko lang na ang susunod namin tatargetin ay ang legal sector. No? Inuna lang namin talaga yung dalawa, yung ICT procurement sa IRM kasi yun lang ang natapos namin within the 30 days. Pero actually nasimulan namin yung legal sector din. Hindi lang na-complete. Kaya yan ang target namin for the next maybe 1 or 2 months, no? The legal sector. So, wag muna siyang pakasiguro.
Ay, maraming salamat po. Now, bago po tayo magtapos, I'd like to recognize our guest in the press briefing room, my good friend, Miss Nadia Montenegro. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us. Thank you very much. And since wala na po tayong mga questions, unang-una, maraming salamat po kay Secretary Maynard Guevara. Maraming salamat kay Dean Dairit. Maraming salamat po kay General Eleazar. Maraming salamat, Yusek Roque. Maraming salamat sa ating mga miyembro ng Malacanang Press Corps. At bukas po may briefing tayo. Live po tayo bukas from my city of Baguio dahil meron pong testing activity na gagawin si Mayor Magalong at saka si testing SAR Vince Dizon, at meron din pong mga iba pang mga proyekto na i-inaugurate tayo, including I think a road project in Cannon Road, no? So I'll see you tomorrow po for our press briefing. And of course, thank you very much Philippines for tuning in. At sa ngalan po ng ating Presidente Rodrigo Roa Duterte, ito po ang inyong spokesman, Roque, nagsasabi, kung ika'y korap, magtago ka na. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat.